Pule, this is intriguing. Why were these two members of Shepherd Bushiri's legal team arrested?
Well, a very good afternoon, Sally, and we do know that they were actually detained for about 8 hours on Monday. Were expected to appear before the Pretoria Magistrate Court, but the matter wasn't enrolled. So the Hawks are trying to find out as to why that was the case. Some of the supervisors, the investigators are trying to actually come for clues to actually understand why, the alleged suspects did not actually head into the dock. But most importantly, what we know is that they are facing charges of corruption, intimidation, and defeating the ends of justice. We also know and have been reliably informed by sources that this is also in relation to some of the statements that were allegedly falsified by the pair in terms of the young women who were allegedly who accused the Malawian pastor Shepherd Bushiri of raping them. Now, what we do know is that according to what we understand is that some of these young women would actually be taken outside the country where they would be asked to change their numbers just so they couldn't be in contact with the authorities. And later on, what would happen is that these statements will then be taken in by the lawyers to the authorities, but this was just a step to actually blindfold the authorities and mislead them from actually getting to the actual truth of what could help them have their investigations become successful.
All right, so I'm going to walk myself slowly through this one. So the allegation is that Shepherd Bushiri's lawyers were actually just covering up any evidence that might have come out in this matter. Is that right?
Definitely. In fact, they were being used for what we could call his dirty work in terms of trying to slow the process of having the authorities get closer to what could be possible clues for them to crack some of the investigations. Very importantly, we've been tracking some of his employees who were close to him. And now there seems to be a crack in the relationships between some of the group of members who worked for him, and some of them are now spilling the beans, wanting to be cleared of any wrongdoing. And as we spoke to one of them, this is what he actually had to say.
Pule, before we get to that, I want to go back to these two lawyers. They were briefly arrested on Monday for 8 hours. They were then released from custody. So the Hawks wants to know why these two were released and why the matter was not enrolled. So am I correct that there are no answers as to why they were released? And do we know where they are currently?
Well, definitely. As we stand, there aren't any answers as to why they were released. And that's why we are aware that some of the supervisors of the investigators are trying to get to the answers of why were the two released and why the matter wasn't enrolled before the court. And most importantly, now we do know that the lawyers are currently out and that they are not in custody as we speak.
All right, so we don't quite know where they could be. Now, tell us about this employee. You've got an exclusive interview. Tell us a little bit more about what you've been able to find out.
All right, and what we spoke about with the employee is around this web or alleged scheme that was being used as an operation to try and have, these young women drawn to the Malawian pastor. What we're being told, this was sort of like a modus operandi of having them falsify statements in attempt to try and protect the Malawian prophet. So it's quite a lot that he was saying, Sally, and as technical as it was, we actually got the chance to actually get these statements in position and try to see if indeed what he was saying was actually true. And this is what he had to say when we spoke to him.
Pule Bushiri's lawyer is the one that was making the affidavits, and you sent I took some of the affidavits, and there are other guys who were also sent with other affidavits. I'm not the only one, and we'll go outside the country or to another province to make the ladies to sign in exchange of money.
These are potentially incredibly explosive allegations. The Hawks, as you've explained, Pule, are now looking into some of these issues. Do you know how close they are to a breakthrough, or could it end with perhaps these two people that the Hawks want to speak to fleeing the country?
Well, as far as we understand, Sally, we don't know how far as to how the Hawks are close to some of these clues and trying to find out if indeed, yes, this was correct. But we do know that they have been working quite closely to the story in terms of trying to crack the whip, especially while knowing that the Bushiris are expected to appear before the High Court in Malawi next week ahead of their extradition trial. So this would be some sort of work to try and make sure that they have a strong case if the extradition process is successful for the pair to appear in the courts of South Africa. And as it is right now, the Hawks are quite adamant that they're trying to get everything they can to try and put the story to bed once and for all.
Thank you so much for all that update. A really important story. It sounds like it's developing very quickly. ETV reporter Pule Letshwiti-Jones.